All right, welcome everybody to the first of what I expect to be around 8 or so of our online video lectures this semester. Um, so these are not supplemental, okay? They're not going to be talking about things that we talk about in class. This is going to be entirely new material that I'm going to be talking about only in these videos. That being said, of course, I do understand that people are going to have questions. They're not going to be 100% clear, not to mention it's only a one-way street with these videos. So if you do have questions, first thing I recommend is just watching the video more than once. If something didn't make sense, watch it again, see if it clarifies it. If it still doesn't, just write down a couple notes, write down a question or two, and bring them to class. Please bring them to class because I can clarify them not only for you in the moment, but I can also clarify them for everybody in class as well. And there's a good chance that other people may have similar questions and uncertainties about what I'm talking about in the video, and that'll help, clarify things and kind of get everybody squared away in one go. There is time set aside on Mondays, typically, right before lecture, to clarify anything in these videos as well as just anything up until that point. Whether it was online, like I said, in these videos, or in a face-to-face lecture in class, we can kind of smooth things out, smooth out the wrinkles before we dive into the next week's material. And the last note here that I have is that I'm going to be doing my best to keep these kind of structured and walk through them slowly and try not to use anything that we haven't talked about yet in class. That said, all or the majority of these videos were pre-recorded prior to the semester even starting, and so I may be a little lost in my notes here as far as what we've talked about and what we haven't, especially once we get started in the semester. Things may shift around a little bit. So if I do use a term in the video or use a tool in Premiere or something like that that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, maybe we just didn't talk about it as much in class as I'd hoped prior to that point, or maybe we just hadn't talked about it at all. And if that's the case, then once again, just write down some notes, okay? Say, hey, Nick, you mentioned this, or you showed us this thing in the video, but that's not something that we knew, and you used it as though we knew it, right? So I'm going to try my best to clarify everything I go along. Even if it's something we talked about, I'll just do my best to, reiterate it if we have talked about it. Repetition is the mother of learning. Like I said, if I do that, I apologize, first of all. It's, kind of the world we live in is kind of confusing at the moment anyway. And so just write down some questions, bring them to class. We'll clarify and kind of try and keep everybody on the same page before introducing new material. Because this stuff is definitely sort of building blocks. We have to lay the foundation, and then we can start introducing more advanced concepts as we go along. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the first one. Our first one is going to be just kind of a timeline 101. We're going to take a look at some of the stuff on the timeline that we didn't look at in class, particularly on the far left of that timeline, what all those little icons mean, what they can and can't do, and also just some shortcuts that we use that have to do with the timeline. So just copying and pasting, because it's a little different in Premiere, and then, well, I should say different in Premiere than a Word editor like Microsoft Word. And then some transition shortcuts, so how you can actually apply your transitions using the keyboard. So hopefully that'll save you a little bit of time with your first project. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is copying and pasting. Now before we talk about actually how we copy and paste, the shortcuts are the exact same as those with the Word document modifiers like Microsoft Word and Pages if you use Mac, things like that. But in order for you to copy and then paste something, you need to tell Premiere where to paste it. And that gets kind of involved with all the stuff that's going on over here. So before we even really talk about copying and pasting, let's just talk about all these icons over here and what they mean. Okay, so we already know that our video tracks are on the top, numbered video 1 through 3, and on. If we need more video tracks, we can add those. And then audio tracks below, audio 1 through however many we need once again. By the way, if you have additional tracks that you do not need, you can get rid of them. You can right-click kind of anywhere in the blank space here and choose Delete Tracks with the ellipsis after it. That will open up this window. And with this window, what I like to do is just check both of these boxes off. And that's going to get rid of all my empty tracks that are video and all my empty tracks that are audio. And then you just click OK, and it gets rid of them. It's simple as that. And if I need to get another track, it's the same thing. Add tracks. Tell it how many you need. Let's say I need 3 more video tracks above video 1 here. Click OK, and there it is. And I also had 1 audio track selected when I did that, so it added an audio track as well. So that's the first step in kind of how you can manipulate how many tracks you either have or do not have. That said, another way to add a track, let me show you this very quickly, is if you find a video clip of some kind, and then you bring that video clip down into your timeline, you can actually drop it on a track that doesn't exist yet. So here we would have video 5, but it's not visible. If I release now, it's going to create a video 5, and it's also going to create the next audio as well, whatever the next possible audio was, if it didn't have an audio 5 already. So let me go ahead and select that and hit delete or backspace on my keyboard to get rid of that. That was just an example of how you can add additional tracks if you need them. You don't have to create a track in order to add a clip to it first, is what I'm getting at with that. So back to all these icons over here. Let's discuss these. So over here, first of all, let's talk about these lock icons. These lock icons allow you to lock a track. Basically, when you click one of these, your track gets these little zebra lines across the entire thing, and you cannot interact with anything on that track. You cannot click it, you cannot delete it, you can't drag it, you can't select it. There's nothing you can do to that track at this point. You can't even add anything to it. It is a locked track. Now, that said, you want to be careful with locking your tracks, because right now this Dancing 14 clip is technically linked to this Dancing 14 audio, and if these tracks were not locked, I can move these together because they are linked to one another. Let me undo that, Command-Z or Control-Z if you're on Windows. But if the track is locked like I had it a moment ago and I try to move the audio, well, the audio is going to move without the video, and then you're going to get this mismatch warning. What this is telling me is that my audio, see that little plus 7.31 or 7:31, that's telling me that my audio is 7 seconds and 31 frames ahead of the video clip that it goes with. Okay, so it's just letting you know that you have an audio and video mismatch. So I'm going to undo again, and that is just an example of why you don't want to lock your tracks. I very, very rarely lock a track. Let's say I have like my graphics for my video entirely done, and I'm not planning on changing anything about them. I might want to lock it then, or I've nailed the audio, right? I'm doing a commercial, and my audio, the music itself is perfect. It runs at that exact 30 seconds that I need for TV, and I have all the cuts I need. I could lock that music track and then not have to worry about necessarily messing it up. But if you're a competent editor and you're careful with what you're doing, you can absolutely get away with entire edits without using those lock buttons. I very, very, very rarely use them, even myself. Okay, the next set of buttons we're going to talk about is this middle column here that when you hover over it, it'll say Toggle Sync Lock. My suggestion to you is just leave these as they are. If you ever see one of these with a little line through it like that, you want to click it again. What that allows Premiere to do is something that I honestly can't even explain to you because I very rarely use it. Once again, it has something to do with desyncing and unsyncing your audio and your video. And once again, so my recommendation to you is just leave it as is, okay? Try not to mess with it. Because I've seen students get their videos, especially videos that have audio synchronized to it, like somebody talking. Suddenly, you start looking. It starts looking like a bad a dubbed movie, like a foreign dubbed movie, where you've got your audio not lined up with the lips properly. So leave these icons as is. They're not something you should be using. They're not something that I ever use. So if you ever see one with a line through it, make sure that you click it again to bring it back to its normal state. All right, moving on. Next column over, we have these little eyeballs for the video track, and below that we have these letter M's for the audio track. These are basically toggling the visibility of the track on or off. So if I don't want to see video track number 1, I can turn it off. That's just going to hide anything on video track 1. Mute my audio there for a second. But if I bring something up to video track 2, I'll see it because it's on video track 2. Okay? So video 2 you can see, video track 1, doesn't matter what's on it, you will not see it. So that's what these little eyeballs are. It just toggles the visibility. And this visibility, mind you, we're not there yet, but when we get to exporting or finalizing a video, in other words, making it into a single watchable file that you can then put on YouTube, for example, this will carry over into the final product. Okay, so if I were to export this video right now, you would not see this second clip because it is on video track 1, and video track 1 is muted or invisible. Okay, so bring this back down. Now the M's are basically the same thing except they're the mute, they're the audio. So for example, currently, let me bring down my volume just a little bit, and if I hit play, I can hear Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars playing because it's on video track, it's on audio track number 2. But the audio from both of these clips is muted because it's sitting on audio track 1, which is currently muted. So that's how you can mute a track, and it's helpful in this case because I don't want to hear all the people talking and laughing and having a good time, believe it or not, because more than likely the DJ in these video clips is playing entirely different music, and it's not going to sync up properly. So in my case, I want to just mute all the audio that's incoming from my video clips. And this is actually what you will be doing for your first edit, where you're going to be doing a montage, basically a basic skills edit, and you're going to be putting audio underneath a video. You're going to pick a song of some kind, and you're going to scrub out or remove the audio from the video clips itself. And the easiest way to do that is just to hit that mute switch and keep your video clips all on video 1 and audio 1. And then you can put the music on a track below that, and it'll be fine. So that's the mute switch. Now, in addition to the mute switch, the audio tracks also have these little solo track switches. All this does is, it doesn't really matter what combination of stuff you have muted or not muted. If you solo a track, you're only going to hear that track. Okay? I could actually have all these unmuted, and I can click solo for this one, and you see that these little M's become gray. That's because it's basically telling me that, yeah, the track's not muted, but you're still not going to hear it. Why? Because you have a track soloed. In other words, you're only hearing that track. And for those of you that may be wondering, yes, you can solo more than one track. So if I want to hear only tracks 2 and 3, I can click that. It doesn't matter what other tracks are technically muted or not muted. I'm going to, for that moment, hear only those 2 tracks. So I don't use soloing too much myself, but you can if you'd like, especially when your edits get a little bit more complicated on the audio side of things. It can be useful. And then the last set of icons here are little microphone icons. These just allow you to record your voice directly into the computer, directly within Premiere. So if you need to do a voiceover, of course I recommend having a nice, decent microphone, not the built-in one that I have currently in this computer here. But just as an example, you click on this, it's going to start playing. So I'm actually going to pause it real quick to mute that track so we're not hearing it. Let's try that again. I'm going to hit record on video on audio track 3 here. You're going to see this 3, 2, 1 countdown timer up in the program panel, and then it's going to tell you recording. And it's actually showing me my audio meters as I'm talking. And even though nothing else is happening, it is creating an audio recording right now. And it's going to, as soon as I'm done recording, I can press the red microphone icon now to stop recording. And there it is. This is the audio that I just recorded while talking, placed on audio track 3. It also is created up in your project panel as well. So if you have your project panel open, you'll see audio 3 in this case, or 3_1. It's called audio 3 because it was placed on the 3rd audio track. And then it just starts to _1, _2, and label them that way if it needs to create additional ones. So I'm going to go ahead and delete both of these. It's going to warn me and tell me that there is a sequence that contains a reference to one of these clips. That's fine. I'm going to say yes, and it's going to delete them not only from my project panel, but also from my track down here because the master clip up in my project is gone. Really quickly, just as a side note, I am talking about my project panel, and it's located up here. Now in class, you guys have probably been looking at a screen that looks more like this, where your project panel is down here. But we did talk about in class about workspaces and how you can customize Premiere. So if I'm ever in one of these videos talking about something and it's in a different location than you're used to, just remember that all you need to do is go up to Window and find the panel that I'm talking about. We talked about panels. So I was in my project panel. You can go down here, projects, and you can have more than one project open at a time. That's why it gives you a list. But I only have the one. So it's going to highlight the one in blue like it is here that I was in, the project panel. If I'm in the source panel, it's here. Program panel is here. But you can rearrange and customize these once again however you like. And I have my own workspace created up here called Nick Editing, because this is the layout that I prefer. I like having all my main panels at the top, and I like to have as long and big of a timeline as possible down here because it gives me the most real estate, the most screen space to work with, so that I can do my editing without having to, have a tiny little screen to bother me. Okay, so we talked about most of these. Now, the key ones that we're going to talk about are the ones that are on the side over here. So you may be noticing that sometimes there's this additional little V1 and A1 that appear over here on the left. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And you might be wondering, well, what is that and why is it happening? For example, if I open up a song, you may notice that the V1 disappeared, but the A1 is still there. That's because what these are your source patches. Now, source patches are not something that I even use myself. Basically, what they allow you to do is to indicate which track you want to receive whatever's in the source panel by clicking one of these buttons. You have 2 buttons down here, Insert and Overwrite. I don't use these. I find it much simpler to just drag whatever you need down into your timeline and place it directly where you need it. Because with the patch buttons, whether it's the Insert or the Overwrite, it is looking for which one of these is currently patched. And you can move this A1 by clicking anywhere. So any of my tracks can technically have my A1 patch. And then any of my video tracks could have my V1 patch, but I'm not receiving a V1 patch right now because this is only audio. There's no video component to what's in my source panel currently. So if I go back to something that has both audio and video, like this clip here of the bride, you'll notice that now I do have my V1 and my A1. So these are almost always going to be sitting here on video track 1 and audio track 1. And if I were to click one of these buttons here, like for example, Overwrite, well, there it is. It overwrote what was here currently. My clip, suddenly it just disappears at this point and it starts playing this clip of the bride, and then it resumes back to this clip at some point. That's what the overwrite does. And that's the same thing that happens if I were to manually, let me undo that, if I were to manually drag this clip down and place it on this track, I'm just erasing that part of the video, okay? The video is not being bumped further to the right to make room for this. It's just overwriting it. It's deleting this portion from here to here of the original video. So I'm going to undo one more time. Now the other one is insert. Now insert does it differently, where it's going to actually like cut all the timeline and bump everything to the right in order to make room for the clip that you're trying to put in. But once again, I don't use these. I don't use insert or overwrite as far as the little buttons go. I just bring my clips down in my timeline and place them where I need to, and I make sure to place them in a way that's not going to overwrite something. So I'm not going to put it here because I'm going to overwrite this clip. I'm not going to put it here because the audio is going to overwrite the song there, the Uptown Funk. I might place it one more higher. If I place it here, I'm safe. I haven't overridden any of my footage or my audio. I can also, let me undo, bring it and just place it here at the end. And then I can bring it in or manipulate it or attach it to this video in whatever way I may need for my edit. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So that's what these this first column is. These are always going to just say A1 or V1, and it's going to be wherever you decide to put it. But I don't use these, so don't expect me to ever show you anything beyond this point. I just wanted to clarify what those are. Now, the ones that are very important and kind of what we need to, and the reason I saved them for last is because everything we're going to talk about in this video from this point on is going to have to do with these. And that's this big column right here. This is V1 and up, and then A1 and down with the numbered ones. And sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're not. This is your track targeting column. This is the way that you target your tracks in order to do certain things such as copying and pasting and also your transition shortcuts. So let's take a look at how we do that. So my first sequence that I'm in here right now, the one that's currently open, is called copy and paste. So let me demonstrate a copy and paste. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit with the little zoom slider down here. I'm going to select this first clip. The audio comes with it attached because they are linked currently. And if I hit copy, which is Command-C on a Mac, if you're on a PC, it is Control-C, just like you would use in a text editor of some kind like Microsoft Word. So Command-C, I've copied that clip. Now if I hit Command-V, just like in a Word editor, it needs to know where to put it. And there are two ways to indicate where to put it in Premiere. The first one is actually your playhead. Think of this as the little blinking I-beam that you have when you're writing text in Microsoft Word. This is kind of like the same thing with copying and pasting. But here's the problem. If I hit paste right now, where is the video and where is the audio going to go? Because I have multiple tracks. So if I hit paste right now, they went on tracks video 1 and audio 1, but why? And the reason why is because it's looking for not only where your playhead is currently at, but also which tracks are currently what we call targeted. So track targeting allows you to indicate which tracks you want to receive something when you paste. So I'm going to delete this and try it again, but this time I'm going to change up a few things. I'm going to turn on, let's say, video track 3 and video track 5 and audio track 4. So now I have a whole bunch of tracks targeted on both sides, both audio and video. And if I hit paste again, well, it still puts it on video track 1 and audio track 1. And the reason for that is because it's looking for which track is not only targeted, but what's the lowest numbered targeted track. So currently, both video 1 and audio 1 are both targeted. They're the lowest numbered track on both sides. Now, if I were to delete this and remove both of those, and I'm not removing anything, these are just toggles. I'm just toggling them on and off. Turning these on or off, by the way, doesn't change anything about your edit in the moment. Okay, these are just switches that you're just toggling on or off that could potentially change something once you use some keyboard shortcuts. So now my video track 1 and my audio track 1 are turned off. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off audio track 2 as well. And if you've been following along, you should know that now if I hit paste, which is Command-V or Control-V for PC users, it's going to put it on video track 3 and audio track 4 because those are both the lowest numbered targeted track on both sides. It does not matter that I have video track 4 and video track 5 targeted as well. They are higher than 3, okay? So that is how you copy and paste. Now, let's say that I have some graphics. Let's say I have, oh boy, I'm not sure if I even have graphics in here, but I bet you I do in here somewhere. Yeah, here's a lower third of some kind. Let's throw that in here. This is just a graphic. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so this is the lower third. Obviously, it has nothing to do with this video, but we saw this in class where things that are on a higher track up here above whatever's below them. So this graphic here in the right corner is above the video below it, and that's why we see it above the video. But let's say I copy both of these, the video, the audio that comes along with it, and the graphic. If I hit copy, and now I come back down here and paste, well, what it's going to do is do this. It's going to it's going to paste the video and its audio that comes along with it on the lowest numbered track, and then anything above that just gets bumped to the next track. So video 4, video 5, and so on. Just to clarify, if video 4 and video 5 are both turned off, it's still going to put it on video 3 and then paste onto video 4 as well. It does not matter that video 4 is not toggled, okay, or targeted, as I should say. It's looking for what is the lowest targeted track. Any video elements that are above your lowest video are going to go above it, and any audio elements that are below your audio, I don't have any in this example, are going to go below that audio as well. If originally my graphic was one higher and I copy and paste, it will also place it one higher, just like here. It's basically going to make it the exact same as it is down here, but it's just going to split everything up for video or down for audio to whatever the lowest numbered track is for that side, okay? So that is how you copy and paste. You need to have something copied, first of all, and then you need to know that it's going to put it wherever your playhead is currently at. So the playhead up here, I can move it wherever I want. And it's also going to be looking for which is the lowest numbered targeted track for both the video, and if you have audio attached, or if it's only audio, doesn't matter, it's going to be looking for that as well. Now, if you have none of these turned on, it's just going to default to video 1 and audio 1. So there it is, okay? So if you have no track targets turned on or off, I should say on, if they're all off, it's going to paste it on the lowest track, in this case V1. Regardless of whether there's something there or not. If I paste right here, it doesn't care that there's a clip here. It's not going to say, oh, well, let me be careful and bump things up to video track 2. Nope, it's just going to overwrite it and get rid of whatever is there. So be very careful when copying and pasting. I'm not expecting many of you to need to copy and paste in this class, especially for this first project. But when the time comes, you may need to do that, and you're going to want to know how. So this is how you do it. You need to indicate to the software where you want to put something, and be aware of why it's doing things the way it is when you hit paste. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about in this lesson is transition shortcuts. And there are a few of them, but we're going to start off with just the video side of things because you guys are building a video. We're going to get into audio shortcuts later on, and I'll give you the keyboard shortcut for an audio transition as well. But for right now, I'm just going to give you one keyboard shortcut to learn, and that is Command D. If you're on a PC, it is Control D. So Command D or Control D, what that does is it applies your default video transition. Now, before we get into how you actually apply it, let me talk about what the default video transition is. If you go into your effects panel, once again, if you can't find it, go up to Window, go to Effects, and it'll point it out to you. It'll highlight in blue, and it'll show you where it's at in your workspace setup. Under Effects, we find Video Transitions. In the drop-down arrow there, we can expand it and find Dissolve. And if you click that, you will find Cross Dissolve. Now, if you'll notice on my screen, it may not be the case on your screen. It should be, but it may not. Cross Dissolve has a little blue bounding box around it. What that's telling me as the editor is that that is my current default video transition. If I go into my audio transitions, by the way, and there aren't that many of them, just one folder of crossfades, there's only 3 of them, you'll notice that Constant Power also has a little blue bounding box around it. At all times, you should and will have a default video transition and a default audio transition. So in other words, if you use those shortcuts that I'm going to show you in this video, you will apply either a cross dissolve for video or a constant power transition for your audio. But like I said, audio is not on our books at the moment. Let's just talk about video. You can change what your default transition is. Let's say that I'm going to be doing something that includes a whole lot of, I don't know, fade to black or dip to black. I'm going to right-click on that and I'm going to set the default transition as that. And it's going to move that blue bounding box to dip to black now. So if I were to use my Command D shortcut to apply a default transition now, it's going to be the dip to black transition, and it will not be my cross dissolve transition. My recommendation to you is that you don't change this. Leave it as cross dissolve. That's going to be like 80 to 90% of your transitions should and probably will be a cross dissolve, if not just a straight cut. Okay. Remember, we already talked about what the original 3 transitions are that we use the most as editors, and those are a cut, a cross dissolve and a dip or a fade, usually to black or white, but you can do any color. But after a cut, the second most common is cross dissolve. So if you are adding a transition, there's a very high likeliness that it'll be that. So it's a good idea to just leave it at that. But if you find that your default transition is not cross dissolve and you want it to be, this is a way you can come up and do that. Just come up in here, right click on that and set it and move that little blue bounding box to become your default video transition. So how do you actually apply it? Well, in this first timeline here, I'm going to show you how to do it with a selection. That's why it's called selection. You may notice that this timeline is not video. These are just still images that I've used over the years, or taken over the years, I should say. And they'll work just great for this example here. So in order to add a cross dissolve, you can do that by making a selection. But right off the bat, I'm going to show you why it may not work. I've selected this image here of this model, and it's selected on the timeline, and I'm going to hit Command D. Once again, if you're on PC, it's Control D, and it's not doing anything. And the reason for that is because it's actually touching other clips. So let me show you what would happen if I separated one of these clips from the rest. So I've moved this clip away from the others. It's not touching anything, and I'm going to select it. If I hit Command D, well, there we go. Now I've added a cross dissolve on both sides, and if I play through it, sure enough, it fades in. It's dissolving from the nothing behind it, or next to it, in other words, this here, the blank space, and it's going to also fade away into the nothing at the end. So that is how you can add a cross dissolve to a clip that's not touching anything. Very useful for if, for example, you have a lower third of some kind, like a graphic. It's on the second track up here. It's above your other video, and you want to fade it in. You can do that with by selecting it because it's not touching anything on either side. You can use Command D to make it work. Let me undo that and bring it back down. Undo again and undo one more time so it touches. If I select a clip and it is touching something only on one side, well then that's the side that will not receive a transition if I hit Command D. But the open end will receive a transition if I hit Command D. So basically what the software is saying is if your clip is touching another clip and that other clip is not selected, it cannot make the assumption that you want to add a cross dissolve between these two clips because these two clips, this one will also change because of that. You're going to start seeing a little bit of this clip's handle footage. These, of course, are still images, so they don't really have to. You don't have to worry about handle footage because the handle footage is going to look identical to the clip itself because it is a still image. But if this were a video clip, same thing. You worry that you might include some handle footage that you do not, and the software doesn't want to make that assumption for you. So if you want to add a cross dissolve, let's say to this clip here of the girls on both ends, you actually need to select all three of these clips. And now you can hit Command D. And it's going to add a cross dissolve here and here. It's going to add one on both ends of this middle clip because all three of these clips were selected. And once again, for the same reasons I just mentioned, it does not add one here and it does not add one here. So that is one way, and there are several, that you can add a cross dissolve or your default video transition, whatever it may be, using Command D and having a selection. If I select this entire timeline, Command A, or just draw a giant box around it, and I hit Command D, sure enough, it's going to add a cross dissolve on every single cut point because everything was selected. So that includes the beginning where it's just going to fade into the video here, and the computer may struggle a little bit. These are pretty large images. Yeah, it's struggling a bit, but as you can see, it added cross dissolves between all of them. So I'm going to hit undo, remove those, and then let's take a look at some other ways that we can actually add cross dissolves with a selection. Up until now, I've shown you that you can select clips by either clicking on them, or you can draw a box to select multiple clips, or just one, however you need. But there's another way that you can make a selection in this software by clicking on cut points. So if I click on the cut point here between these two images of my dog, and I want to add a cross dissolve between these two, all I really need to do is click on this cut point here and select it like that. You can see a little tiny red bracket, and it doesn't matter which way that bracket is facing, by the way. You might get this little red bracket arrow thing pointing either way. It doesn't matter. As long as the bracket is on that cut point somehow, hitting Command D will add a cross dissolve. And you can select more than one cut point. Easiest way to do that is actually to hold Command. Okay, so if you hold down the Command key, or if you're on PC, it's going to be Control, and you draw a box, you're not going to select clips. You're actually going to select the cut points between them. Okay, and don't worry that your program panel got all weird looking. That's just something else that we're not going to worry about right now. But if you hit Command D, it's going to add cross dissolves to any cut point that you have selected. So that is how you can use your Command D or Control D if you're on PC shortcut to add your default video transition to a selection, okay? So just remember, if you have one clip selected and it's not touching anything like this, it's going to add it to both ends. Beautiful. If you have a clip that's touching something on both ends, it's not going to add it anywhere. If you have more than one clip selected, it's only going to add it to those cut points that are selected on both sides, like so. And you can either select individual cut points and do them one at a time, or you can hold your Command or Control key and do it that way. To select more than one cut point, and then Command D will apply the transition to all of them. So that is your video shortcut for this lesson and how to apply it through a selection. Now, let's move on to our final sequence here, in which we're going to talk about transition shortcuts for using track targeting and the playhead. So let me grab some video. Let me actually just copy and paste all this from the first sequence here. There it is. Let me get rid of this cross dissolve here at the end. There we go. So now we have our video clips on the timeline. We're going to stay with this just because we might use this graphic here as an example as well. And I'm going to show you how you can actually add cross dissolves to multiple things at once using not a selection method, but the track targeting method that I was talking about earlier. So when you hit Command D and there's nothing selected, you may expect nothing to happen, but that's not the case. Premiere is actually trying to do something for you. And what it's looking for are two things. Number one, it's looking for where's your playhead, and is that playhead near a cut point of some kind? And then two, it's also looking for which tracks are currently targeted. So if I were to put my playhead right here, it is near these cut points right here, where this clip and this graphic and everything kind of ends and moves on to the next one. And if I were to hit Command D right now, it will in fact apply a cross dissolve, but it only added it, let me zoom in a little bit, it only added it on video track 1 between these two clips. It did not apply one here like that. And the reason for that is because video track 2 was not toggled. So when your playhead is near a cut point of some kind, and the video track is toggled, it's going to apply that transition regardless of what clips are there, okay? None of these clips were selected as you saw, and they don't need to be, because like I said, if there's no selection, Command D is still trying to do something for you. It's just looking for those two things. So if I wanted to add a cross dissolve to this graphic and between these two clips as well, I can do that. I just need to make sure that video track 2 is also toggled. And now Command D is going to apply a default video transition, in this case cross dissolve, to any cut point that is near my playhead. And when I say near, I mean near. Like your playhead has to be pretty close to it. It can't be living out here. See right now, Command D. You can even see up here sequence is flashing because Command D is right here underneath it somewhere. Oh yikes! Well, oh there it is. Apply video transition, Command D. It can't do it because there's nothing there. But if I move it over here, you'll notice that oh well, all of a sudden you can do it. In other words, Command D. You don't have to look underneath the sequence here. You can just hit Command D on your keyboard. It will apply it. Okay, so that is the other way to use that default shortcut. Command D will apply the default video transition, whatever it may be, to selection, as long as you're following those selection rules that we saw in the last sequence here. Or it'll apply it if there's no selection to whatever cut point is nearest to your playhead or near your playhead. Your playhead has to actually be near it, next to it somehow, and those video tracks need to be toggled as well. Okay, so if I undo to get rid of those and I turn off all my video tracks, Command D will do nothing. It doesn't matter that I'm near a cut point. Heck, I can be directly on the cut point like this. It will not apply it because the video tracks themselves also need to be targeted. So the targeting thing can be important beyond just pasting as well. Okay, so this is how you can apply. I'm giving you a couple different ways. Pick the one that you like the best to apply your shortcuts, okay? And remember these. Please remember them and use them, okay? I don't want everybody to be going up into effects and finding the transition you want, in this case cross dissolve, and dragging it down on your clip and putting it on the clip every time. That is time consuming. It's manual labor. We have technology, right? So use that technology to make your life easier, to expedite or speed up the process of your edits, because editing is and always will be a time-consuming thing, okay? So you need to meet deadlines as an editor. You need to meet deadlines because you have projects that you need to turn in on time. I need to meet deadlines because the TV show or the commercial is going to air regardless, and it needs to be done. So I have to polish things off and get them nice and ready to go for my clients in time. So these are things that save time. And it's good to save time because then you can actually go back and really, take a look and kind of touch up on things and really put some extra work into your videos. So hopefully this lesson was pretty straightforward. Please watch it again if you need a little bit more clarity, or go back and rewind and rewatch a part. If maybe I spoke a little too fast, I apologize. I'm trying not to make these terribly long. And take some notes, write down some questions, bring them in class if you have them. I will gladly clarify things, not only for you, but for the entire class as well. And with that said, I will see you, I believe tonight is Wednesday, so I will see you tomorrow, Thursday night.